User in your channel started recording.
Wow. The Mask of Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe.
Whoa.
Shut the fuck up, Zeno.
Okay, I'll stop.
The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar, and its seal, the redness and horror of blood. There were sharp pains, and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores, and dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body.
Keep going.
User was kicked out of your channel.
The scarlet stains upon the body,
User joined
and
your
especially
channel.
upon the face of the victim, where the pest band would shut him out from the
Microphone
aid
muted.
and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero, what a shitty name, was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. You fuck! This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers have entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers, and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned with such precaution. The courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was fully to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatores, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine, all these and security within. Without was the Red Death. It was towards the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the peasants raged furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, the masquerade. But first, let me tell you of the room in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suite formed a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slid back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the winding of the suite. The windows were of stained glass, whose color varied in accordance with the prevalent hue of decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue and vivid blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in the ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and lighted with orange, the fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The seventh apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls. Falling. What the fuck do you say, Zeno?
Huh?
Interrupting me again.
No, I didn't mean to do that, but I didn't actually mean to click Z.
That hung all over the ceiling
User
and
in your
down the
channel was
walls,
banned from the server.
falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber, only the color of the windows
User joined
failed
your
to correspond with the decorations. The panes were scarlet, a deep blood color. So now on the story, we'll refer to blood as tech.
Wait, what? I'm blood now?
Yeah, so whenever we say the color blood, we're gonna call it tech instead.
Wait, what's the point of the story though?
Shut the fuck up.
It's a story. You have to finish reading it. You.
No,
Oh,
because
sorry.
blood is not safe for work, so we have to censor it tech.
Okay.
Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any
User
lamp
in your
or
channel was kicked from the
candelabrum
server.
amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro, or depending from the roof.
User joined your
There
channel.
was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers. But in the corridor that followed the suite, there stood opposite to each other, to each window, a heavy tripod bearing a brazier of fire that protected its rays to the tinted glass and so glaringly illuminated the room, and thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic
wake up.
appearances. But in the western or black chamber, the effects of the fire light that streamed upon the dark hangings through the tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenance of those who entered that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. End of part 1. Part 2. It was in this apartment also that there stood among the western walls a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro
Wake
with
up.
a dull, heavy, monotonous clank, and when the minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and very deep, and, of course, exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note that and emphasis that at each lapse... I'm fucking reading, Zeno, don't interrupt me. And emphasis that at each lapse of an hour the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance, to hearken to the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole... this word's not safe for work either. I'm replacing it with tech. Whole tech company. And
Wait.
while a chime of the clock yet rings, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and that the more aged and sedated passed their hands over their brows as if in confusion, reverie, or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once... Zeno, stop fucking poking me.
No, let me get some popcorn and then keep reading. Hold on,
Suck
be
my
right
dick.
back.
At once pervaded the assembly, the musicians looked at each other and smiled at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispers vows, each to the other, that the next chime of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion, and then after a lapse of 60 minutes, which embraced 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then were the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before. Taking a break to take a sip of water. But in spite of these things, it was tech and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Duke were peculiar. He had a fine eye for color and effects. He disregarded the decor of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery. His conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure he was not. Oh God. He had directed in great part the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers upon occasion of this great fete, and it was his own guiding taste which had given characters to the masquerade. But sure, there were grotesques. There were much glare and glitter
User
and
in your channel
piquancy
timed out.
and phantasm. Okay. Much of what has been since in Hernani. They were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. They were delirious fancies such as the madman's
Wait. It was Hernani.
Shut the fuck up!
Oh,
There was
it
much
was
of the beauty.
Hernani.
Shut up. There is much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre. Something of the terrible, and not little of that which might have excited disgust.
User in your channel was banned from the server.
There we go. Wow.
Uh,
2. Alright. Alright. Oh, you played the birds of the word, so he's been banned for a minute. Alright, to and fro in the 7 chambers, they are stocked. In fact, a multitude. Sorry. There, in fact, a multitude of dreams, and these, the dreams, withered in and about, taking hue from the rooms, and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And anon, there strikes the ebony clock, which stands in the hall of the velvet. And then, for a moment, all is still, and all is silent, save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chimes die away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now again the music swells,
User
and the
joined
dream
your
lives,
channel.
and writh to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many tinted windows
User in your channel
through which
started recording.
streams the rays of the tripod. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the 7, there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored. Oh, sorry, messed up. And there flows a rudder light through the tech-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls. And to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet, there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal, more solemnly emphatic than any which reach their ears who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartment. But those other apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life. And the revel went whirling on until at length there commenced. I thought this was supposed to be horror. The sounding of midnight
User
upon
joined
the
your
I hear
clock.
channel.
story time.
User
And then the
joined your
music
channel.
ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy sensation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened. Perhaps the more of thought crept, which more of time drew the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled, and thus too it happened. Perhaps that before the last echo of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence. There were many individuals in the crowd who have found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure, which has arrested the attention of no single individual before, and the rumor of this new presence has having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz, or murmur, expressly of disprobation and surprise, then finally of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms, such as I have painted,
User
it
joined
may
your
well
channel.
be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited. But the figure in question had out heroed, and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince in definition decorum. There are chords in the heart of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion, even when with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jest. There are matters of which no jest can be made. The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger, neither wit nor propriety existed. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to foot in habilimentations of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closet scrutiny must have difficulty in detecting cheat, and yet all the might have been endured, if not approved, by the matter veiled around it. But the murmur, oh God, had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his
User
broad
joined your channel.
brow, with all the features of his face, was besprinkled with scarlet horror. With the I messed up. Ooh, I messed up. His vesture was dabbled in tech, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was besprinkled with scarlet horror. when the eyes of Prince Prospero fell upon this spectral image, which was a slow and solemn movement, as if it more
User left
fully
your
to sustain
channel.
its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers. Okay, he was seen to be convulsed in the first moment with a strong shudder, either of terror or distaste, but in the next, his brow reddened with rage. "Who dares?" he demanded hoarsely of the courtier who stood near him. "Who dares insult us with this blasphemy mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise for the battlements." It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms, loudly and clearly, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first he spoke. There was a slight rushing movement of this group in the direction of the intruder, who was in the
User joined your channel.
moment was also near at hand,
User
and
left your
now,
channel. User joined your
with
channel.
deliberate and stately step, made closer approach to the speaker, but from a certain nameless awe,
User left your channel.
I swear to God, Ari.
police. But from a certain nameless awe with which
User in
the
your
mad
channel was
assumption of the
kicked from
murmur
the server.
had
User
been
joined your channel.
inspired the whole party. There were found none who put forth hand to seize him,
User
so
joined your
that
channel.
unimpeded he passed within a yard of the prince's person, while a vast assembly, as if
User
with
left
one
your
impulse,
channel.
shrank from the centers of the room to the wall. He made his way uninterrupted, but with the same solemn and measured step which has distinguished him from the first. Through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green to the orange, through this again to the white, and even thence to the violets, ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly to the 6 chambers, while none followed him on account of a deadly terror that seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and had approached in rapid impetuosity to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleamingly upon the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterwards fell prostrate the death of Prince Prospero. Tears. Then, summoning the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revelers at once threw themselves into the black apartment, and seizing the murderer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadows of the ebony clock, gasping unintelligible horror, my phone's ringing, at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like mass which they handled with so violent at rudeness, untenanted by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in tech-bedecked halls of the revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that last of the tech, and the flames of the tripod expired. The darkness and decay and the Red Death held imitatable dominion over all.